President Trump is hosting the Prime Minister of Ireland in Washington today. Micheál Martin is the first European leader to meet with President Trump at the White House since that tense Oval Office meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Today, the president spoke about the economic ties between the U.S. and Ireland, blaming previous administrations for sending pharmaceutical jobs overseas.
We do have a massive deficit with Ireland because Ireland was very smart. They took our pharmaceutical companies away from presidents that didn't know what they were doing.
The visit comes as President Trump's new tariffs are now in place, adding a 25% charge on all steel and aluminum imports coming into the United States. The European Union quickly responded, announcing new tariffs on some $28 billion worth of U.S. industrial and farm products. The EU measures will cover more than just steel and aluminum, to include everything from textiles and home appliances to peanut butter. The Trump administration also announced massive job cuts at the U.S. Department of Education. More than 1,300 employees were fired last night. The agency's workforce has now been cut nearly in half, raising questions about how the government will now handle student loans and services for disabled students. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi is with us from our Washington bureau. Olivia, how interconnected are the U.S. and Ireland, and where do the two also differ? I mean, do you expect the prime minister will have to navigate any of those differences to avoid a similar dust-up to the one between Presidents Trump and Zelensky recently?
Yeah, it's good to be with you on this afternoon, very busy afternoon in Washington, Lindsay. We've already seen an Oval Office meeting between the Taoiseach, that's the Prime Minister of Ireland, Micheál Martin, and President Donald Trump today, where they talked specifically about the issue of Ukraine. Trump was talking about that very delicate ceasefire that we have right now, or that he would like to see rather, between Ukraine and Russia. We know that Secretary Rubio and Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, yesterday negotiated with the Ukrainians, who said they'd be open to this 30-day ceasefire, but they have to see where the Russians are on this. Trump, speaking about the Russian side of it, says we have half a ceasefire, now we need Russia to sign it. He refused to really assess any part of the deal that Putin could sign. He said, I think it makes sense for Russia, but then he went on to say, we discussed potentially a land deal with Russia as a way to get them to the table on this, but then went on to say, we really don't want to talk about this here and waste this time. Kind of showing you how the White House views this. This is not Trump's favorite topic. He does not like talking about this. We know he likes talking about trade, tariffs, and immigration much more than the war in Ukraine. But the Taoiseach, who is there today, actually had breakfast with the vice president and some members of Trump's cabinet this morning, where he spoke publicly about the issue of Ukraine. And he said that Ireland is ready to play their part in supporting the work to end the conflict. He went on to say they want to secure peace in Ukraine and the Middle East. The Middle East part there being very interesting because Ireland has very much aligned itself with Gaza in this ongoing war between Israel and Hamas and the humanitarian efforts on the ground in Gaza. We know Trump, however, has been very open and very vocal to being on the side of the Israelis, saying he's prepared to give them whatever they need to end this war, issuing threats at Hamas, also saying that he would like to perhaps see Palestinians move out of Gaza so they could develop the area. So these two men very much at odds, but by and large, this Oval Office meeting extremely cordial, and they'll have a few more events today where the two leaders will be together.
You mentioned it's a busy day in Washington, so let's go ahead and cover some other ground as well. Last night, we mentioned the Department of Education slashed nearly half of its staff. We've been reporting what the Department of Education does and doesn't do. It does not set curriculum. That is up to local schools and districts and jurisdictions. It does, though, support federal college loans and Pell Grants. So what does this mean about essentially how they'll be able to tackle what the Department of Education is tasked with?
Right. We're learning about half of the workforce. And just to give you a sense of the scale, there's only about, 4,000, a little over 4,000 people that work at the Department of Education. Comparatively to other agencies here in Washington, that's a puny number. It's small. But as you mentioned, what they do is federal aid, federal grants. They don't set education curriculum standards. They perhaps give guidelines on how to handle certain situations. But essentially what this means is the impact of this. It certainly has an impact on financial aid and the distribution of that. I went digging into the numbers of the kids who are at college, and at any given point, it's anywhere between 15 to 18 million when you factor in grad school. About 10 million of them are on financial aid. That's more than half, much more than half. So there's certainly going to be some impact on that level if you shutter the Department of Education. Think of FAFSA, financial aid, all those college students that are on that. So a lot that this will be impacting certainly when and if they shutter this department.
Also today, the White House beefed up tariffs on steel and aluminum imports into the U.S. The European Union quickly responded by announcing retaliatory tariffs. When do those go into effect? What is included? And could anything come out of the Oval Office today that would change things?
Well, the first tariffs we saw, we woke up this morning, I should say, 2 more tariffs, and it was a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming in from all over the world, not just Canada, Mexico, and China, but everywhere. And the EU retaliated by levying tariffs on $28 billion worth of goods coming from the U.S., and they're American goods, so they're trying to hit it where it hurts. That includes Harley-Davidson, Levi, bourbon, peanut butter, all sorts of products that get made in the U.S. are now facing a very stiff tariff in Europe. Trump is still saying he wants to negotiate through all of this, but we know he does have the support of steelmakers in the U.S. who have pushed him for years specifically on this issue, saying that they have been unfairly treated, and Chinese steel that's been subsidized and that's below grade has been flooding the market. So they've been asking for something like this to really level the playing field. Trump feels like he has their backing. So I would be interested to see if there's any relief really on these specific new rounds of tariffs.
Okay, Olivia Rinaldi, thank you.